Well, good morning, Michelle.
Good morning, Stephen.
Can I start with a simple question? Are we in an election campaign or not?
Depends who you talk to. I would say definitely yes, and certainly everyone is behaving like that, but Malcolm Turnbull would say we're actually still in a governing phase. Of course, we heard that with Julia Gillard, didn't play out so well for her, but Malcolm Turnbull is determined to call this a governing period because he wants to get out some big policies, some big decisions next week, the decision on the submarine contract, and he doesn't want to let Labor get traction for this argument that it's sort of a semi-caretaker period.
But is there any serious possibility that there won't be an election?
Absolutely none. You can put aside some time to go to vote on that day.
Thank you. Well, one of the dominant issues this week has been regulation of the banks, with the government proposing to beef up ASIC, the Australian Securities and Investment Commission, and to increase ASIC's funding, or perhaps reverse its own cuts, and Labor now saying it supports a Royal Commission. Which side seems to be capturing the public mood at present?
I think Labor at the moment has the best of this debate. There's a lot of feeling against the banks in the community. Many people have been hit through bad financial advice from the banking sector, and the feeling that the culture needs to be changed, that the bad behaviour needs to be further exposed, I think is quite strong in the community.
I wonder whether there's some symbolic warfare going on here as well. The coalition had a Royal Commission into trade unions and seems to be targeting the practices of organised labour. So the ALP is targeting the big end of town, the banks, taxation of multinationals and so on. At the least, is Labor blunting the government's attack in this way?
You can see it as a bit of tit for tat politics. Maybe there's something in that, but I think that Labor is being primarily driven because it's aware that issues of bad behaviour in the financial sector, of corporations not paying adequate tax, these sorts of things are really resonating in the community these days, and of course with the international publicity about tax avoidance, this just makes that even stronger. I do think that at this moment Labor has blunted the coalition attack on the union problems and the union's scandals. Of course, Malcolm Turnbull this week had the Senate reject the legislation, his industrial legislation, to bring back the Australian Building and Construction Commission. He was making a big thing of this. It's a double dissolution trigger, and yet it did get overwhelmed by the whole debate about the banks.
You make an interesting point in your column today that politicians can't just live in the moment and ignore what they've said in the recent past. So last year, Labor opposed a Royal Commission into banking, and the government did all it could to weaken the Labor government's future of financial advice reforms. I'm wondering, is there a kind of Donald Trump-like quality creeping into Australian politics where you can say anything, regardless of what you've said before, provided that it has the effect you want here and now?
I don't know that we've got to the Donald Trump stage. I wouldn't want to be arguing that, but I think that it is true that more and more politicians are able to live in the moment. This is not just because they want to and they're very media trained, media savvy, so they just deflect issues about the past, but also the media lives in the moment too, and although the politicians have a lot of exposure to the media doesn't always go back and say, well, what did you say a couple of years ago? It doesn't necessarily fully probe why U-turns have been made.
And is that partly because more journalists are generalists, and so you don't have the specialists interviewing people who can remember what was said and done recently?
I think that's one of the factors. The other thing is that the media, the politicians take each day as it comes and just putting the past down as history.
Well, Michelle, you and I have long memories. We'll do our best.
Thanks, Stephen.